this is the first annual Fail Forward Fest. And apparently, I know, let's hold your applause, Actually, believe it or not, people applied to win a seat on the Fail Forward train. And we have 3 contestants who have been selected out of a crowd of some 20 brave souls who told a failing story. And it was selected by the crack team at Strive Together, and they're going to be joining me on stage. And I also want to remind you that we had hoped that Jim Shelton from the Department of Education and right-hand guy to Arnie Duncan, Secretary of Education, would be able to join us today. He couldn't, but his spirit is in the room. And for those of you who were at the first convening 4 years ago in Alexandria, you may recall it was Jim Shelton who just over the top, over the moon, over everything, said this is a fabulous, fabulous idea. So we're missing him physically, but he's here in spirit. And so I just wanted to remind you that people in the U.S. Department of Education are paying attention to our work, and that matters a lot to us. So in teeing up this session, part of it is to acknowledge in some very informal ways how really hard this work is. And I think unless you're doing it, you just can't even convey to others how complicated and ambiguous and ambitious the work is. But we also know that we learn through what doesn't work sometimes as much or more than we learn from what does work. So I was going to try in my own journey. I sympathize with all the people who tried to see the screen from the podium, even the people who pushed the advance and pushed the wrong button. So that said, I want you to think along with me about how you arrived in Dallas. You know, sort of your personal journey that brought you to this place so that we can be reflective about what's working for us and what's not. And for me, it's really something that began in a one-room school in Rolla, Missouri, where I was a co-classroom teacher for grades 1 through 8, and now has landed, I guess I would say, at the State University of New York, which has 465,000 students and 64 campuses. So the contrast for me on life's journey was a way of thinking about the stops along the way. So one of the big stops for me was when I left high school and landed at the Ohio State University, and I stayed there a long time, leaving only to teach for 3 years, and then I came back. And one of the lessons I learned at Ohio State is that we had lots of networks, and I asked my husband, Ken Howie, to sort of help me reflect on networking, because some people are just prone to networks. Have you noticed that about yourself? You just keep doing this kind of group work, and the really hard thing about networks is, you know, getting work done in between meetings, et cetera. But one of the lessons, one of the failures of the several networks that are noted on this slide is that they were all those silos. So the K-12 people were working in a network, and the higher ed people were working on a network. And the biggest lesson for me in this group called the Holmes Group and Holmes Partnership, we were trying to reform teacher education, and we were trying to do it without the teachers. Okay, that's failing forward. So I have to say that by the time I landed in Milwaukee at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, we had pretty much figured out that in order to do anything, we had to get the teachers and the teachers union and the superintendents and the universities and the social sector and the corporate sector working together. But we were still in those silos. And so one of the things we struggled with was how to mix it up a little bit. You know how classroom instructors are called teachers and university instructors are called faculty? So we wanted to overcome that failure by putting more teachers in faculty classrooms through teachers in residence. So I think we failed for a long time before we finally figured out that we could actually create boundary spanners. Boundary spanners. So that sounds like a cradle to career term. So from Milwaukee, I had the great privilege of moving to Cincinnati, and of course there are more lessons there than I could cite, and you've heard a lot of them. The failure, I think, was that dark blue line between Ohio and Kentucky, where we had to constantly say it's just a river, not the Great Wall of China. And so some of you are working across districts and across communities, and some of you are working across state lines like Cincinnati. But the irony and the big failure at Cincinnati, which we no longer even have to talk about, is that initially we really couldn't get the Cincinnati public schools engaged. Try as we did, we knocked on the door, but they were busy doing other things. And so we crossed the river and got the Kentucky school districts engaged. And guess what happened? You can't do this without the Cincinnati public schools. No kidding. So, sometimes if not failure, maybe frustration, we do finally get it right. There's another failure that we don't talk about anymore. We called our partnership in Cincinnati the College Access and Success Partnership because when we couldn't get into the school districts, we decided that the one thing we did own was college completion. So we were going to launch this whole big program just on the end of the pipeline because we couldn't get into the school district. But when we did finally get the school districts to the table, it was somebody at Procter & Gamble who said, "You're thinking too small, you have to think bigger." And in the course of about 5 days, we totally rebranded ourselves from the College Access and Success Network to Strive. Again, lemons turned into lemonade. So on the way to New York and the opportunity to lead a State University of New York, one of the things that had troubled me in Ohio and in Milwaukee and Wisconsin was that it's such a struggle to get our universities engaged totally. And so one of the failures that turned into a success for me was being able to frame a vision statement for the State University of New York that actually included the goal of sealing the leaks in the education pipeline. So cradle to career initiatives have popped up all across New York. And that's when, in the next stop, we figured out that we needed some kind of alliance to coordinate the work because we weren't learning from each other. Again, a failure that we managed to turn into success and actually has led us to think about state policy around our partnerships and our friends and all those logos that you like to show as well. And that for me is sort of stumbling into Dallas with some lessons learned and some failures, and ultimately for all of us, a lot of success. So I'm just going to go right to bring up our winners, if you will, who are going to share some of their failing forward stories and see if we can't get you engaged in their stories. So let me call up to the podium as they come to take their seats. Ritika Kurup. Ritika is in Learn to Earn, which is Dayton, Ohio, sort of in the center of the state of Ohio. So Ritika, we ask you to join us in any one of these orange seats. She will be joined by Michelle Magnuson. Michelle is with Thrive, Santa Barbara County, California, of course. Thank you, Michelle. Take the second seat. I'm going to occupy that one. And then joining Ritika and Michelle is Bill Krim. You've met Bill. He is with the Promise Partnership of the United Way Salt Lake. So we're going to hear these winners and their fail forward stories. Each is going to get about 5 minutes, and then Jeff is going to take over and see if we can't get some genuine audience participation around this hot contest of failing forward.